Hey everyone, welcome to Season 3, Episode 18 of the Senstennial podcast. Today we're going to be talking about what's going on with the refereeing in recent Sens games, the health of Matt Murray, and what Ottawa's future goaltending situation looks like, whether DJ Smith or Pierre Dorion could be on the hot seat in the near future. And we'll finish off talking about maybe some other stuff, maybe getting into a little bit of what irks us about the Sens lately. So we'll kick it off. We'll talk about refereeing now. Matt, I know you really wanted to talk about this one, so I'll let you take it away from here.
Yeah, I'd probably have to say it's been pretty crappy. I think the biggest issue that I've been seeing is that they're so inconsistent with their calls and when they're making them and what they're calling. I mean, if you look back to the Florida game, we had, I think his last name's Nicholson, and he was just making some terrible calls. And I think after the first period, they had 5 power plays to our 1. Yeah, I don't know if it's completely like fair to always be like, well, it's the reffing that's sinking us. Obviously it's not. I mean, our team is very mediocre at times, even dog crap. But at a point there has to be some consistency with how many calls you're giving to another team. And like referees look to do that. You know, look at Tim Peel 2 years ago when he was like, I got to give them a call. When you're calling 8 power plays for one team and the other gets 1, you've called the game improperly. There's not a single game that there's not an infraction that happens. That's just, it's not true. No hockey game is perfect. Penalties are bound to happen. And they do need to be called. And then you look at the absolutely egregious penalty that was called on Thomas Chabot last night against the Vegas Golden Knights that ultimately cost the Senators the game by giving them a power play in the last 2 minutes. On television, that didn't look like a trip. I don't know how you could be an on-ice official and look at that and say that's a penalty, unless you're far away, far behind them. And they actually had a video of that frame too, and it looked like he was around his legs, and then the Vegas player just falls. I mean, we can't look at this always as a narrative. You know, the Sens are always getting screwed over by the refs, blah, 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 blah. But I'm pretty positive. We've talked about this on the podcast this season. With that said, consistency is why, you know, why these guys do what they do. They hope that they're not going to get called for some things, and they expect to get called for other things. Look at when they put in that cross-checking thing at the start of the season. Look where it's at now. Literally, I think the only guy that gets penalized in the league for that is Eric Brandstrom. Like, there's so much cross-checking still in front of the net, and it just goes uncalled until what? Like, it's a little too far away from the net, and then you call it.
Well, like look at that cross-check on Brady Tkachuk where he was near the play, but he wasn't in possession of the puck, and he just gets cross-checked from behind. I think it was Clag. And anyway, whatever. But he just cross-checks Brady Tkachuk into the net. Brady Tkachuk looks back and he's like, is that not an interference, a cross-checking? Yeah. Like, you could call numerous infractions on that play alone.
100%.
So, and then, you know, I tweeted it out when Chabot got that penalty in the dying seconds. I was like, man, that guy needs some milk if he's going down that easy, because that skate, like the skate blade and the hockey stick, like tapped each other, and that guy was like falling down. So he must have already been off balance, and Chabot's little tap just was the, you know, what he needed, I guess, to get the call. And it sucks. And at the end of the day, you really hope that your penalty killers can get you to overtime, just so that you get that little break before overtime starts, rest the guys up. But it is what it is. It just kind of, that's the way the season's been going for Ottawa, and it's rough, but it doesn't help when reffing also brings you down. Like, they're already without Batherson. They were without Norris for, I think it was like 15 games. They've been without Pinto for most of the season, Colin White for most of the season. These are all players who would either be solid depth players or players who are star players. Shabbat, again, he missed time. And Murray's been on IR 5 times, but we'll get to that. Essentially, you have so many guys that are injured that are players who could really help the lineup, that when you have that reffing added to it, the bad calls and infractions that aren't called against the opposed team, it's disastrous. So
yeah, it's just another hurdle you have to get over. It's like it's moving the goalpost just a little more. But that's the funness of refereeing and what you need to do.
Yeah. And kind of adding to that. Oh, sorry, Bennett. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the only way that the NHL refereeing is consistent is that it is consistent in its inconsistency, which is to say that every team, it's never fair night in, night out, but it's like every team gets their turn to just get taken to the cleaners by the refs 1 or 2 games a year. And like Matt was saying to start us off, it's like, I don't think that's why the Sens have been bad on this road trip. I don't think that's why the Sens have been bad all season. There's obviously much deeper, more consistent problems with this team than NHL refereeing. But I mean, that call on Shabbat at the end of the Vegas game, it was such nonsense. And it's like you never see it, like 99 out of 100 times that doesn't get called. And it's like when the guys commenting on the game say, wow, that's a really rough call, and then the analysts post game say, wow, that's a really rough call, and then when like the broadcast ends and it switches over to like Sports Center and they start off the program with the highlights you just watched, and they're like, wow, that was a rough call. That it was kind of nonsense.
It's probably a rough call.
I think it's probably a rough call. And it was so deflating. And it's like the Sens had as much as you can dominate a 1-1 game, the Sens had kind of dominated that game. And I know that Vegas also had 40 shots, so we could get to that too. But it's like the Sens got such a raw deal yesterday against the Knights, because we played so well in the third period. We were going so strong. We were going to take this team to OT, maybe get our first point of the trip, maybe get a cheeky overtime win. And to see, Shabbat get called for a nonsense penalty, and, we get immediately scored on. There's like 5 seconds left of this game. It was just, God, it was just brutal.
Yeah, and let's talk about the road trip. So by the time this comes out, the game against the Blues will probably have been played. But so far, they go into Tampa Bay, they score the first 2 goals, and everyone's like, okay, wow, they came out ready to play. It was great. And then, of course, Tampa Bay, being the team they are, comes back. Vasilevsky just brick walls the team. Sens lose 5-2. Go into Florida, ice is tilted, lose 3-0. Go into Arizona, and I don't even know what to say about that game. That was
a wild game. That's the definition of a barn burner.
Yeah, that was nuts.
I would say, if you like the team we had and how it was playing in January, would have got that lead and been able to defend it properly. Everything about that Arizona game, despite scoring 5 goals, was just pathetic. Like, they picked it up and then lost it. And, the defense didn't help itself. I mean, yeah, Murray gave up 8 goals on 30 shots or whatever, but he wasn't the sole problem. You need guys to be able to secure that lead and then lock it down for the rest of the game. And where was that, right? So just wanted to interject that.
No, for sure. And that game was something else. We already touched on the Vegas game, of course. Don't need to reiterate that. But this road trip's just been really rough, because it's like each game something different has gone wrong for them. I know reffing you could overall put as what led to the downfall against Vegas, but realistically, it was also just Leonard putting on a show. He robbed Stanford on that one chance. with Arizona, the defense did not come to play. Florida, lopsided in refereeing. Tampa, just a cup-winning team who you could tell their experience just shone through. And it's rough. And we'll see how they do against the Blues tomorrow. That'll be another test for them. But so far, the road trips, it's been rough outside of the Vegas game. So
absolutely. They're just, I mean, they've, other than last night, when they seemingly were the team that should have won, like there hasn't been a good performance from the Sens. And I mean that game against Florida was an atrocity in and of itself. Forsberg puts on another dazzling performance, and you get, I think it was like 17 or it was 18 shots. Bobrovsky got an 18 save shutout. And I mean, there was no net presence. There was no net pressure. There, like everything we put on net was a little flubber, and that just can't happen. And that's the consistency issue with this team. Like they don't have the it factor, and whether that's Batherson being in the lineup, whether that's consistent goaltending, whether it's not the carousel that's on the back end with guys going in and out and in and out. And oh my God, why are Tyler Ennis and Adam Gaudette sitting when like you have a guy like Austin Watson or Dylan Gambrell, like just have their lineups, or Zach Sanford for that matter. They just have their lineup spot.
Well,
why
Sanford,
are
though,
Ennis and Gaudette, who are skilled?
That's trade value.
Yeah, I guess so. But at the same time, like you want to win games. And yeah, I don't know about you guys, but Sanford is one of the most, like, I remember reading tweets from St. Louis Blues fans being like, this guy will dazzle you and then do nothing for 12 games. And I cannot think of a more like, yep, you were right moment this season, because holy cow, he's been so just like invisible most of the time. Like, I don't know if we get anything for him, quite frankly.
I think they will. And you know why? No, I think they will. And honestly, the reason why is because he won a cup with the Blues. And honestly, that is what GMs look at. The mindset in this league really hasn't changed. We see it every year. It's even when like Thomas Vanek was struggling back when he was with, what was it, the Isles, and then he went to Montreal. Players, even when they have reputations as having issues with their game, if they've won something in the league, or they have this pedigree of being a player who can do something in the playoffs, they get some sort of trade for them. And there's been interest in Zach Sanford, as far as, whatever hockey analysts are saying. I think the Sens will legitimately get, like, at minimum, a third round pick. I would not be surprised. I would laugh at it. I'd be like, okay. But I think that someone would be doing that because they're like, oh yeah, he's a big guy. Like he occasionally uses his body. So, but I mean, realistically, it's if when he has those games where he has flashes of offensive creativity, he forechecks hard and stuff, you're like, wow, okay, this is a great player. But then he has other games where he just kind of coasts. He's not very active in the defensive zone, and it's just weird. It's like he just picks and chooses which games he feels like playing hard in. I don't know. It's something else. But I actually do think that he'll be one of the better trade assets that the Sens have going into the deadline, but that's another conversation. Bennett, what were your thoughts on the road trip so far? Because we kind of went on a little tangent there.
Yeah, it's another rough stretch of games. I remember our annual California road trip was also just like a cycle of misery for us as well. Back in, would that have been November? I think that was from like the month of hell in November. So this is like another trip to like the southern part of the US. Another completely forgettable escapade. The Sens have shipped 18 goals in the last 4 games, and they've only scored 8. And 5 of those came in one game, which we lost anyway. So, I mean, we lost all of them, but it's like we scored 5 goals in a losing effort, and then we've scored 3 goals in the other 3 games. That's not good, and the thing is, like, it's tough to pinpoint where the problems are. Like, the offense has been largely absent for 3 of the 4 games, and the goaltending was rough in 2 of the games, and the defense was, like, especially rough in most of the games, but Forsberg bailed us out once or twice and made it look kind of respectable. And where's the problems are everywhere. Like, what do you point it to? It's like, like the whole house is on fire. How do you triage, or how do you decide where to direct the water, right? It's just one of those times. It's like, having Norris back is great. It was great to see him get on the goal sheet in the game against Arizona, I think it was. And if he can settle back into the lineup, that'll be good to have, like, another, someone that actually poses a threat on the power play, and can generate some offense at 5-on-5. But man, we are missing Jake Batherson, and there was also, like, a player unidentified hole that is just like a stock photo of an NHL player that should be in our top 6 that isn't there because we don't have them.
I guess
but
it
we
was
need them.
Shane Pinto, right? Like, Shane Pinto was supposed to be that guy.
Yeah. If
to an extent.
Yeah, and it led to Stutzle getting moved to center. So
we need another winger that can, drive play as regularly and reliably as Batherson does, because Batherson is the only guy on the wing who can actually do that game in, game out. Tkachuk can kind of make things happen, once or twice a game, but not, like, really, like, this doesn't generate the same quality of chances. Stutzle's playing at center, and that's great. He always has a moment, pretty much every game. But without Batherson, our offense just looks completely anemic. And that's just like one guy. One guy should not. You can't build a team that you hope to win with, but losing one player, completely, like, takes you apart. Like, that's just not viable. And that's the thing I've noticed the most consistently, especially in this road trip, is like the offense just isn't there. It's like the goaltending comes and goes, and the defense is the defense, but, like, we know that there's help. The cavalry is coming on defense, like, much as it sucks right now, I'm not too worried about it. But the offense, man, like, we gotta see some of these guys take some leaps in consistency. And we need Batherson back, and we need someone else there to help out, because right now the top 6 is just not there.
Yeah, and you brought up goaltending, so let's move into that. Matt Murray, he's been on the IR 5 times this season, which is nuts. So honestly, like, what's his longevity or reliability going to be like in the Sens crease? I know today I've seen a lot on Twitter about what the buyouts would be for Matt Murray, if the Sens could trade him with retained money and a pick to get a team to take him and just have, that 50% retained salary on the books for a couple seasons. There's been a bunch of stuff thrown out there. So we'll start off with that. And Matt, what do you think about Murray and his reliability and longevity in the crease?
It's a tough question. With Murray, he's been hurt a lot. I think in his tenure as a Senator so far, he's been hurt 7 times, or put on the IR 7 times. And I think 1 or 2 of those may have been concussions, but I could be wrong. I know he's also had, like, neck stuff. Those are 2 very, very volatile injuries for a goaltender, well, a hockey player in general. If you don't have your back, you can't stand up. And if you don't have your head, you're done. At what point does Matt, to start off, like, it sucks. I feel bad for him as a person, because you don't want a guy to consistently get head injuries and just have to, like, play through it. And holy moly, like, the Senators fan base can be so volatile towards goaltenders. They have been, pre-Craig Anderson, and we were blessed for, 6 years when he was playing really well. And then he got older and the defense got battered. And
nice save.
Saved, yeah.
Yeah, like, and that's the problem. Like, everybody expects your goalies to be the best thing ever. And sometimes that's just not realistic when you have a crappy team in front of them. We, up until this point, have had one good defenseman, and Zub and Holden are like, they're a new pairing, which is great. And they seem to be thriving. But if you want your goalies to succeed, you don't want them to be consistently the guy saving your team. Anton Forsberg has done that twice in the last 4 games, or in last 2 games. Murray didn't have the opportunity to do so because he gets lit up because his defense was just trash. Do I see him being like a long-term thing? No, because, he got ran into by Nikita Zaitsev the other night. And like, that's your player doing it. And that's because Zaitsev is a crappy defenseman. And his ability is just not there. So he's not going to be able to defend properly. And he got walked and pushed into Murray. That's it. Until like you have a good enough and capable defense corp that doesn't, have guys that are big, but know how to play defense. Like Zaitsev and Brown aren't good defensemen. I mean, Zaitsev, not so much. He doesn't have huge size, but yeah, he has more size than Eric Brandstrom. But Brandstrom's a miles better defenseman. But because he's small, that's, nobody considers that. But people are talking about possibly re-signing Josh Brown because why? He's 6'6". Like, Matt Murray or any goalie who is in that Senators crease is going to struggle with the defense, and they've not focused on that area to improve it. And here we are. So, like, is he the option long term? Probably not. I don't know what this is, because our general manager just refuses to look for external help and just looks at the draft. So what? We have to wait 3 years to get good defense and maybe a goalie? Like, come on.
I mean, okay, I know we're kind of getting off topic a little bit. I will say that going outside of the NHL and the draft and getting Zub was a huge pickup, and then getting Holden was also a nice pickup. Like, those are 2 external moves. Now, that being said, I agree that you can't just rely on guys like JVD, Lassie Thompson coming up, or Clevin or Sanderson, and all 4 of those guys coming up and being like all futures on the blue line. At some point, the Sens will make a trade, or should make a trade, for external help. I don't think there's any team in the league where you can point and say they home grew all their talent and are thriving off of it. It just, you need to make those external moves, because sometimes those pieces, you just don't get them in your system. So through, your own means of drafting or what have you. So, yeah, but I mean, talking about goalies specifically, Matt Murray, I kind of have been thinking about it the last day or two, and I almost see him as, like, everyone's worrying about his contract. I've thought about the fact that what if he finishes his career on Ottawa on the LTIR? Like, Anders Nilsson was going to before the Sens traded his contract to Tampa Bay. And, I've always had like a soft spot for Murray. I really like goalies, and he's had his ups and downs in Ottawa for sure. Like, there's no denying that. But yeah, like, he honestly, to me, seems like a candidate for the LTIR and just kind of ride out the last 2 years of his contract. I mean, who knows? Like, he could come back and play for the most part of his 2 years remaining on his contract, but just seems like a candidate to me. I don't know. Bennett, if you want to chime in, what you think about that.
Yeah, it's been such a turbulent season for Matt Murray. I mean, he started abysmally. Like, he had like 2 decent games. I'm looking at his game log here. He had 2 decent games to start the season, and then he had an abysmal record for a long time until he was sent down to the AHL. And then he came back in the new year and started strong. We had a lot of good results in January and February. Matt Murray was playing well. And then the calendar pretty much flipped over to March, and his results kind of took a nosedive. And now he's out injured again, and we're kind of back to square one with what's the deal with Matt Murray? What player did we get? What is he actually capable of? Because once again, we're back at the point where we have to say, who knows? Because the guy can look like an NHL caliber goalie who plays at a high level and looks like the guy that won those 2 cups in Pittsburgh for 6 weeks, and then he goes back to being a complete liability. And how do you as a team square that circle? It's a tough question to answer. I mean, right now, a month ago, we all were saying that, Forsberg should be traded for a pick. I don't think the Sens could afford to trade Forsberg for a pick now. Certainly not with Murray injured if he's out for any significant amount of time. And certainly not if he continues to play like he did in the last couple of games before he went down. And that's the thing. I mean, you can't look at this guy's record and see, a 5-game stretch without a game in the 80s for a save percentage. There's always, and the thing is, you can be a great goalie in this league and have a forgettable game. You can have a bunch of them, but not every fortnight. Like a guy like Vasilevsky, he has a bad game once a month or something, not once a week or every 5 games or something. You know what I mean? It's harsh, and it's the hardest position to play. It's the hardest position to acquire help for if you're a general manager. I get it. But I think it's obvious that he's not the answer. And I think it's obvious Forsberg can't be the answer long term. So then we're stuck in a position of, do we go outside the organization, or do we trust in guys like Gustafsson and Sogard and Merilainen? And, we don't really know what kind of players we're getting with those guys. We have an idea with Gustafsson. He has a high ceiling, but, in this season, in the few opportunities he has had, he hasn't impressed. So, yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, I'm just kind of wandering here now. I've lost the point a little bit, but
there's no answer, right? It's a hard question to have to answer, because Matt Murray consistently getting hurt, that sucks, and he's consistently inconsistent. Mm-hmm. Forsberg, in my opinion, is playing way above his ceiling. Mm-hmm. I think it's definitely an outlier. I can appreciate what he's doing, but then next season you go, let's say you re-sign Forsberg. So you go into next season with 3 guys on one-way contracts.
Yeah.
And you put either Gustafsson or Forsberg on waivers, they're gone.
Yeah.
So,
maybe the answer, I know I just said a moment ago that we couldn't afford to trade Forsberg. Maybe the answer is that we have to cash in while his value is highest, even if even if it means that we get rolled for 2 or 3 weeks while we wait for Murray to get his game back together or whatever. The season's gone anyway. I don't know what we have to play for. So,
exactly.
If we can trade him now to a team desperate for some immediate goaltending help, and we can squeeze a 3rd-round pick from them for a guy that we know is not a long-term part of our plans, then maybe we should just do it. Despite the fact that he's playing well, but like you said, this is it's like Andrew Hammond 2.0 right now. We know that he's not playing quite to the extent that the Hamburglar did in that particular run, but he's having that kind of moment, and it's we know he's going to come back down to earth. And Sally with the football and everything, it's we have this thing of signing backup goalies to contract extensions based on a couple weeks of good play, and then they just completely fall apart. We should probably not do that again. We should probably we should probably just.
I'm going to jump in here because I completely disagree with both of you. I actually think that just because the past happened, that you can't just never do it again. Like, yeah, okay, Andrew Hammond, I think, like myself at the time, I was like, they should trade this guy at the deadline. It was the McDavid draft. Ottawa should have not, like, I know for the memories, it's amazing. Like, we look back on, we're like, yeah, it was a sick comeback. We got knocked out in the first round by the Habs. Like, yeah. It was not worth it.
I still hold by, like, we start Andy that game 1 and 2, like we beat the Habs.
Yes.
No question.
Yeah, I hear you, but like, we'll just look at it as it is, right? Hammond should have been traded that deadline. You have a guy who's playing lights out. You probably could have gotten a draft pick for him. Anyway, is what it is. Condon, he kind of saved Ottawa's 2017 season, and then they had a great postseason. I think he kind of like deserved, maybe not the term he got, but he deserved an extension, showing that he had been a reliable backup. It didn't work out. Anders Nilsson, I think that would have worked out if he hadn't had concussion issues. I think that's what derailed him, but he was a solid backup. He played better than Anderson at times. So I have no issues with that signing. It's sad that his career ended from concussions, but it wasn't his fault per se. With Forsberg, to me, what I like is that he's not playing out of his mind amazing, but he's not playing crappy. Like he's not having a bunch of mediocre games. He's having consistently good games, some great games, but he's not knocking out of the water like Hammond, where you're like, okay, this is unsustainable. To me, I think Anton Forsberg, a 920 save percentage, which is what he's at right now. Okay, maybe not. Okay. But if he has like a 910, 915 save percentage as your backup goalie, and you get him like 2 years, $2.5 million. I have nothing wrong with that. And there's a bunch of guys in the league who are being paid that much to be backups and aren't as good as Forsberg is. My one caveat is having the 3 goalies next season that all would need waivers to be sent down. For me, I mean, you kind of have to roll with 3 goalies, I think. Until Gustafsson shows that he like has really taken the reins on being a backup or a starter in the league. I think ideally, and again, this is coming as someone who supported Matt Murray, I think you need to, I don't want to buy him out per se, because that won't be great. But I think if you can do something, like even if you have to send him on waivers, send him down so that nobody's going to claim him. But if you need to send him down and just bury $1 million off his cap in the minors, just that you can play Forsberg and Gustafsson, then do that. Or, I don't know, in free agency, if you want to get wacky and wild, fine, trade Forsberg for a pick. Colorado has both their goalies going to free agency this year. And if you look at Kempfer, he's put up a 918 save percentage so far this season, and Francouz has put up a 924 save percentage in the games he's played. I mean, both those guys are 32 years old. If you want a guy who's not super old and is still a reliable starter, maybe pursue one of those 2 guys. There's a lot of options. So I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, but I don't think that it's the end of the world if the Sens keep Forsberg and re-sign him, because I think he has potential to be a solid backup. Just how he looks in net. He looks calm. He looks stable. He doesn't make all these saves where he's diving all over the place to save. He's just in position. And I know I find too many people are comparing him to Craig Anderson, but he does have that style where Craig Anderson was never super athletic, super flashy, but he was just kind of that guy who positionally he was sound. And that's what Forsberg is. So we'll see what happens. If the Sens trade him, they trade him. But I think that if they re-sign him at this point, I would have no problems with him. So that's my spiel.
I've never thought of Forsberg similar to Anderson. And I guess, like, in a way, yes. Forsberg is way better at wraparounds. So that's where they differ significantly.
I still, as a Sens fan, my heart pounds when I see someone go for a wraparound, because I was scarred by years of Craig Anderson. It just being his total Achilles heel. It's like that and handling the puck. It's like every time I see a goalie step out of their net now, my heart rate spikes.
Well, and of course, it happens to Matt Murray the other night, goaltending and handling the puck, they don't go hand in hand. I'll tell you that much right now. I can appreciate your point of view on Forsberg and keeping him, and it's just hard because this team is crappy. They need to improve, and it would be a significant improvement if they got a pick and could use that pick to go out and get another significant piece to add to your top six. Like, I mean, getting a second or a third pick isn't significant, but if you wrap up two of your other 4 second round picks, you're probably getting a pretty decent player. So that's all I'm looking at it as, because Forsberg isn't part of the future, but something that you get for him probably might be. It's like that Peter Griffin, like it could be, it could be a boat.
So just before we get on to our last topic here, I just want to say that we have a link tree now, which will make everything way easier. So if you're following us on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, our link tree should now be in the bio, and it'll have the links to all our socials and all our platforms where you can find our podcast. So just wanted to plug that. And yeah, so thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll get into that last topic. So yeah, basically this one, what would it take for DJ Smith and or Pierre Dorion to get fired? How long are their leashes? And basically, what's the point where Melnyk just says, no, it's not going where I want it, and I need changes?
Yeah,
that's a good question.
I'll take a bite on this first. I'll start with the coaching. I think if you've listened to our podcast over the last couple of years, I think that I come across as something of a DJ apologist, which I am, because coaching is like, if there's a power ranking of like what are the biggest problems that the Sens face right now, coaching would be at like the bottom of that list, in my opinion. I think this team is honestly well coached, but you can't coach kind of all the problems we were talking about before. You can't coach a non-existent top 6 scoring winger into existence when there isn't one, and you can't coach Josh Brown into a good defenseman. And understand it, like people use Josh Brown as like a stick to beat DJ with. It's like he's one of his perceived like his guys, and he gets all these opportunities and stuff. But like every coach has their guys. But the thing is, like Cooper in the Lightning has his guys. But the thing is, his guys are less bad because the team is better. It's like on a bad team, the coach will have their guys, but those guys are just worse.
His guys, I guess, is like Braden Point and Victor Hedman. It's not even comparable.
yeah. It's like there's a third pairing guy somewhere in the Lightning that I'm sure the Lightning subreddit, he's like their whipping boy or something, but they've won 2 cups, so no one else in the league knows who that guy is. But I'm sure he exists. I don't have the Lightning lineup memorized, but this is like a very roundabout way of saying like coaching is not the Sens' biggest problem right now. Our biggest problem is a lack of offense, a lack of like elite offensive talent, a lack of consistent, reliable defenders, and no clear choice in net. Those are 3 much harder problems to solve than a decent NHL coach. And I think DJ is that. I think what it'll take for DJ to get fired, I think if we don't make the playoffs or even get close to the playoffs next season, maybe he gets fired. But I think that wouldn't necessarily be because he deserves to get fired. I think it would be because Dorion would be one of those like Dorion trying to save his job. His last act is to fire the coach kind of situations, which leads me to Dorion. I think, is this crazy to say that I think Dorion will be gone before DJ is gone in Ottawa? I don't think that's like especially crazy. And the thing is, I don't think that Dorion will be gone soon. I think both of these guys still have a lot of leash, but I think that this team's problems are more on Dorion than they are on DJ, and I think most people would sort of agree with that. DJ, he plays with the pieces that Dorion gives him, and a lot of the pieces that Dorion gives him just fucking suck. And that is limiting as a coach because, what are you gonna do if your general manager just says, "Here's your defensive core: Eric Branson, Braden Coburn, and Josh Brown. Have fun. Good luck at their sport." Like, what do you do with that, right? I think that this team has such a challenge, like this team led by Dorion, and it's not just him. This team has a bare bones scouting structure. We all know that, and that's not on Dorion. That's on above Dorion. But we know that this team has a really hard time finding NHL talent to come in and make this team better. Nick Holden is an example of a guy that has worked that the Sens have brought in the last few seasons. Have there been others?
And I honestly don't know. I think they lucked into him too.
Totally. Like, they were just looking to offload Dodonov, and they got Holden in the bounce, and something about like broken clocks being right once a day. Like, they got a good player in the off, but like I don't think we sought out Holden because we thought he was good. Like,
and then you look at the subsequent move where they go out and sign Michael Del Zotto to a 2-year contract, and he's played what?
Self-own.
Yeah. Like,
he's literally just living in
he's
Belleville.
Lighting up in Belleville. He is lighting up.
I mean, like, great. And I hope they trade him so he can go somewhere else and probably get some NHL time. But at the same time, like, it was a stupid signing then, and it's a stupid signing now because they should have gone and gotten a right-hand defenseman.
So I'm gonna kind of get us back on track here. We're gonna go back to you talking about coaching first. So DJ Smith, he's coached 182 games for the Senators. He has 67 wins, 93 losses, and 22 overtime or shootout losses. And in that time, Ottawa, in all 3 seasons that he's coached so far, have finished second last in their division. Now, power play, I think Bennett has a point. I don't think the power play has been DJ's fault. I think when you lose Norris and Batherson, it's going to take a hit. And of course, as soon as we get Norris back, as soon as we get Colin White back, the power play actually improved. They both have gotten power play points since coming back to the lineup. So that definitely helps. Personnel helps for sure. But I think there's also something to be said for the fact that this season has actually gone worse than last season, and Ottawa no longer has Coburn. I know Riley picked it up later in the season, but they no longer have Riley. Galchenyuk is gone. Paquette, Stepan, like all these guys that were like, oh, perfect, they're getting them all out of here. Well, we come back this year, and you still have Josh Brown and Zaitsev, but they were on the roster last year. And the roster managed to have a better record through 56 games than the current roster has. So I don't know. I think coaching is to blame in some aspects. The penalty kill has gotten better, so I can't really fault him on that. But I kind of think it's half and half. And for me, it's next season, if the Sens are out of the playoff race by, let's say, November, December again, I don't know. I think questions are going to be asked from Dorion about DJ Smith's longevity behind the bench. But I think Melnyk might even be fed up, because how many coaches now has Dorion had under him? What was it? Was Paul McLean the last coach under Brian Murray?
I think so. Yeah.
I think Dave Cameron was the last coach under Brian Murray.
Possibly. But anyway, so let's just say Dave Cameron, Guy Boucher, Mark Crawford, DJ Smith. So that's 4 now. So I don't know. Like, do you think Melnyk would give Dorion another chance with another coach? Or at this point, is Melnyk going to be like, you know what? I think it needs to be a full clean house.
Well, that I've been, as Bennett has been an apologist, I've been like a not apologist,
a critic,
a critic at the least. Because, of his handling with the decor, the forwards, the power play, the penalty kill. At what point do you keep trying things that just don't work? But then it's on the flip side. Like, you have to keep trying things with the same things that you have because your boss refuses to go out and get you better parts. So, I mean, having Josh Brown and Nikita Zaitsev and, Del Zotto and Austin Watt, all of these guys that were, either traded for or signed by Dorion that are still kicking around that aren't integral to the roster, but have to be on the roster because they're on a one-way contract. They can't stash money in Belleville other than the Del Zotto contract. Everything Dorion has done that has been successful, he kind of just lucked into.
I don't know if we can totally say that. Like, I don't think it's fair to say that they lucked into Zub. Like, that is pro scouting that I think actually worked. I don't think that they lucked into Holden. I think that was a player they targeted because of his pedigree with Vegas in the playoffs. And
I think you're giving them a whole lot of credit because Zub had 25 other teams that wanted him. I mean, you have to do your due diligence there. He just happened to pick us.
I don't know. I think that
was on his way out in Vegas. They didn't want him on his back end. They just lucked out, and he was a cap dump for Vegas, and he just happened to work on our team.
He wasn't a cap dump because they brought in more cap. They brought in a bunch more cap.
They wanted to get rid of the contract on the back end, so they did.
I just think they wanted forward depth because Holden up into the playoffs had actually played, I think, less regular season games than playoff games. And I think although he had good playoffs, they said, hey, we have other guys coming up that we want to give a shot. And that's why, because he was bouncing all around that lineup on the defensive side. He was playing with Shea Theodore. He was playing with Zach Whitecloud. So I think for them, it was just he was the odd man out. Now, I think that you can blame.
They had to get rid of him. That's the point.
I guess, but I don't think that like the Sens didn't have to trade for Holden. I think other teams would have taken Dadonov, but that's besides the point. What I'm trying to say is that if you look at Josh Brown and Nikita Zaitsev, those are both players who DJ Smith wanted. Like he calls Zaitsev elite. He calls him an elite defender. Josh Brown's a guy he had in junior.
I think if you give DJ Smith the amount of runway that Pierre Dorion has been given, Smith is going to be more successful. Pierre Dorion,
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Is not a good general manager.
No, I agree.
And we've said all along that, like not all general managers are cut. They excel at different things. And Dorion has presided over, I would say up until this past draft, like some of the most important drafts in Sens history, relatively successfully. But the thing is, when like Dorion has always been like a prospects guy. That was like where he like cut his teeth, and that's been his like primary value to this team was being able to draft well. But when your guy that does the one thing can't do that thing anymore, then it starts to get a problem. And like we talked all about how the 21 draft was a total miss for the Sens. Like we were reaching with every single pick. Like we were literally the laughing stock of the league after the 21 NHL draft. The swing that we got from the 2020 draft, the high of getting Stutzler and Sanderson, Ridley Gregg, who all look really good. Like those were awesome picks. But the swing from there to the 21 draft was just brutal. And it's like when that's the thing that your GM is supposed to do well, and they don't do a lot of other stuff well, that's a huge problem for me. And I totally agree with other Matt here that like I think if you give DJ the same amount of runway you give Dorion, you'll have more success. And I think that if you give DJ better pieces to work with, you'll have more success. I mean, I understand. I mean, like a coach can ask for all the players that they want, but it's like the GM has to get them for you. And it's like he can call Zaitsev elite, but it's like you're the coach. What else are you going to do? Say, actually, he sucks. And,
no, but you don't have to
get rid of him.
It's not black or white. Like you can have an in between. You can say, yeah, he's a good guy for stuff. You don't want to say he's an elite defender that other guys don't like playing against because he's tough to play against. Like that's just BS. Like, I think there's one thing with like gassing up your players, and like another thing to be their whole friggin', I don't know, roadies or what, groupies or whatever, fans. But my point, I agree actually that I think that if DJ Smith was given the same runway, yes. Like for me, the biggest thing isn't actually his coaching style. It's the fact that the players buy into his systems. Like they really like him as a coach. Brady Tkachuk specifically, I know has said as much. I think definitely the Sens could use a different general manager. And I think we could really see what would happen if Jim Rutherford had been hired, for example, when that was rumored. What was that, like a couple years ago? That would have been interesting to see a guy who, I mean, he made some weird moves in Pittsburgh, but overall is a respected general manager in the league. I just, for me, wonder if Dorion was like, oh, who would the Sens bring in? Like, would they promote Pierre Maguire? Like, you know what I mean? Like, who?
I have no idea because of the internal budget, right?
Yeah. But I think it goes beyond that. It's just,
and nobody wants to come here with Melnyk.
It's the candidacy or the candidate pool. You know, like who is going to be interested in coming to the position? So I think that's something that Dorion has, and that's why the Maguire hire was interesting, because here's a guy who potentially is competing for that general manager job. I mean, not publicly, and I know Dorion came out and like dispelled those rumors, but it exists as a possibility. And I don't know how the team would change with him as general manager. That'd be really weird. But like, I don't know. I don't know what candidates are out there who would join the Sens, and we don't want like Peter Chiarelli or someone, right? That would be not good. So I don't know. It's a complicated situation, but in my opinion, like if I could summarize everything we talked about, I think next season, if by November, December, the Sens again are way out of a playoff spot, I think somebody's got to go. Somebody has to respond for it, whether it's management, whether it's coaching. A change has to be made, because unless the injuries are so severe that you're dealing with what you were dealing with this year, where guys are out with COVID, guys are out with all kinds of shoulder injuries, then like, okay, fine. You know, that's why I cut some slack this season. And when some people are like up in arms, pissed off, I'm like, man, to see what DJ Smith has had to do with some of the lineup combinations, and some of them have been questionable, but some just out of necessity. I honestly don't fully blame him specifically for what this team's had to do. And anyway, all that to say, I think no heads will roll until next season, and if the Sens get off to some awful start. But I don't know if you guys share that opinion or have different timelines.
Yeah. No, I think next season is where, you know, it's where it's what it's going to come down to. It's like if we enter in one more season where we're out of it by December, you know, at least one or both of them are going to go.
What about you, other Matt? Thinking the same?
I think that's absolutely fair. I can't imagine the fan base just being okay with another crap season. And quite frankly, like I look at, you know, Troy Mann was given the keys to the draft last year. You know, he was able to pick the guys that he wanted. I'm now very curious if Pierre Dorion takes them back. And he's like, this is the only way I can keep my job. And he goes with the best player available or whatever, because unless he doesn't, you know, unless they don't make the playoffs or draft an absolute stud, that's it. Like he's got nothing left.
I mean, I think, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, and like, I think DJ will probably be here longer than Dorion ultimately.
Interesting. I mean, we won't have to get in the draft today. We'll do that leading up to the draft. But I think if the Sens end up with another top 5 pick, it'll be hard to miss, I think, this year. Guess we'll see. But anyway, I think that'll do it for us this episode, unless anyone has...
Guys, please knock on wood after that last comment.
I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. If you missed last week's episode, we had draft analyst for Daily Faceoff, Chris Peters, on the show. That was a great interview. That's up on YouTube, also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We had a lot of fun recording that. we're looking to get some more guests in the future, but Chris was new to the show and we had a blast with him on. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy that one. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Really appreciate it. And we hope to see you again next week. So thank you very much. And go Sens go, like always.
Later, Gators.
Sens go.